Let's come to our second story, and that concerns the US elections. As the elections near, because they, of course, are going to be held in November, the tempo of all the Palestinians, all of the Democrats and the Republicans also that are participating in the different campaigns is also intensifying. We are seeing Kamalaharris at different campaign rallies. We are seeing Donald Trump in different interviews at different rallies, J.D. Vance, and of course the deputy nominee of Kamalaharris as well, who is also campaigning along. And different points of views, the media is predicting a lot of things. There are different polls that are coming to discuss what the reality of all of it is, in fact, as we speak of the United States of America. Who will lead, who won't? We've been joined by Mark Meirowitz. He's a political analyst, joins us from the United States. Mark, thank you very much to have joined us. Mark, my first question is going to be a very lengthy one, so please bear with me. Labor Day traditionally signifies the beginning of the end of the presidential election cycle. Campaigns are fanning out across the country this week in a rush of activity. It is, of course, the beginning of the fourth quarter in American politics as well. And we've seen a lot of activity from Kamala Harris and Donald Trump as well. The Trump campaign trying to defend itself after a physical altercation between a Trump aide and a cemetery official, which of course created headlines, but which of course I would like you to give your point of view. The army in the US has given a statement that an official at Arlington National Cemetery was physically pushed by a Trump campaign aide. Then of course Ms. Harris also talks about this in a statement, and she says that the cemetery was a solemn place that should be free of politics, describing the campaign's filming of Section 60 as a political stunt. Then the Trump campaign releases a statement signed by family members of 7 of the 13 US troops killed by a suicide bombing at the Abbey Gate in Kabul airport during the withdrawal of Afghanistan 3 years ago, and spoke of the heroism of the troops killed at Abbey Gate, but also blames Ms. Harris for the politicization of the cemetery, asserting that it was the vice president who had disgracefully twisted Mr. Trump's visit into a political ploy. Then Trump and his campaign also post videos from the family members on social media that similarly attacked Ms. Harris. What do you make of all of this? I mean, I'm just jumbling a lot of questions together to collectively ask for your point of view on what has happened.
Well, first of all, the Labor Day piece, is not really relevant here because it's a very strange election. Kamala Harris was not the candidate for president until recently when Biden dropped out. So we have something very unusual going on here, and the timing of it is very unusual because, in effect, Harris was in, Waltz became the vice presidential candidate. They were at the Democratic convention. There were no primaries. No voters voted for Harris or Waltz. They're in, they're campaigning, and the election is on November 5th. So I don't think we can use the same metrics and analysis that we usually do for elections that proceed in the usual way. Now, about the situation at Arlington, that has been pushed way out of proportion by the Democrats. And the media here also has, focused on this. The bottom line is it's a highly political issue, number one, because it relates to the 13 American soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan. And that ties in to Biden's policy on Afghanistan and the pullout from Afghanistan. And the truth is that Trump was invited by the families of the soldiers killed at Abbey Gate to be with him in this section in Arlington. The whole thing's been pulled out of proportion. And the fact of the matter is that we really have to stop doing that because, truthfully, on all sides, it's sacred ground for Americans. It's where our soldiers are buried. And, both sides should stop politicizing it. And but as far as out of proportion, the Democratic and media, NPR, etc., criticism of this is really outrageous because the bottom line here relates to the Afghanistan policy. So what the Democrats want to do is deflect attention from the Afghanistan policy and the pullout, which was considerable disaster for the United States and ushered in the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. And they want to deflect that, and they want to focus on Trump's interaction with families who invited him to Arlington. So I think we have a very strange and fascinating election, but I think very disturbing also because of the timing being so compressed and Harris and Walz just appearing on the scene and Biden stepping out. That is very traumatic, I think, for American politics, and really it concerns me. Thank you.
All right, but Mark, I'd like to understand before I move to my second guest who's also joined us. What about the filming? Do you think that it is allowed in cemeteries such as these to film certain parts of that cemetery? Did Trump ask for or request for permission from the families of those who had laid down their lives? And then, of course, adds to that the comments that have been filmed by the families of these US soldiers who were killed at the Kabul airport. What do you make of that? What's your comment on that?
My comment is simple. Section 60 in Arlington, technically, you're not supposed to take photographs. That's true. But the Gold Star families, the families of the soldiers who perished at Abbey Gate, wanted Trump there, wanted to be photographed with him. So it's really very problematic. Who do you emphasize? I think we care about the families. We care about their feelings. We care about this botched policy on the part of Biden in pulling out American troops and American ordnance from Afghanistan. And recently the Taliban paraded all of the American equipment, hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment that they took virtually without a fight. So that's what's really this is about. As far as the families, I say I listen to their concerns. Technically, they shouldn't have done it, but the families, their feelings are very, very important, I think, to Americans. So that's also a factor to be taken into consideration.
All right, Mark, stay online with us. We've been joined by our second guest, Ahsan Hamid Durrani. He's Director, Policy Research Center. Ahsan, thank you very much to have joined us. Mr. Trump on Saturday, Ahsan, signaled his support for a ballot measure that would legalize recreational marijuana in Florida. While he did stop short of a full endorsement, he did say that he did not believe that marijuana should be criminalized in his adopted home state where it is, while it is legal in other states. But of course, his position pits him against the state's governor, Ron DeSantis, and most of its Republican leaders who are also working to defeat the proposal. What's your take as far as this is concerned?
Well, I think, Omar, it's the series of popular political stunts that Trump has been promising to his voter base. So I think it's a continuation of those mayors, and especially attracting, with such mayors attracting youth voter base. That could be, one of the reasons he is taking such, a position on this issue.
Coming back to you, Mark, I'd like to understand abortion. This is one of the topics that has been on the lips of both the Democrats and the Republicans, and of course this has been a flashpoint as well. Now this election race has returned to this topic, that is that of abortion. Mr. Trump has drawn fresh attention to the fight over reproductive rights last week. He appeared to suggest that he would vote for a measure that would expand abortion access in Florida, angering conservatives. Then he said he is going to vote against it. He has also floated a proposal to require insurance companies or the federal government to pay for in vitro fertilization treatments. Democrats have welcomed the focus on the issue, having campaigned on it effectively in the 2022 midterm elections as well. Whose point of view is being lapped by the US voters? What's your take?
Well, I mean, you're seeing a lot of crossovers in the Democrats and the Republicans. I mean, you've got Kamala Harris, now saying she doesn't want to tax tips of service workers. That was Trump's idea. Now, as far as in vitro fertilization, that's a hot issue for conservatives, and supporting in vitro fertilization is problematic for Trump to support it, but that's been brought up a lot by the Democrats, so the Republicans really need to address it. It's a problem. The very diehard Republicans who are anti-abortion are not going to like that idea, but at the same time, the way that Trump coins it, and the way the Democrats also coined it at the Democratic Convention was, Walz talking about how hard it was to have children, even though he misstated the fact that he uses in vitro fertilization, he actually didn't. So this issue is kind of out there, and I think Trump's trying to diffuse it. The problem with Trump is that he does these things piecemeal. So he'll pick up this issue without understanding that maybe he's picking up a very explosive issue, and then he rides with it and he takes the consequences. He needs to think a lot before he supports a position. And on this one, he may get some real pushback. On the other hand, what's the choice for conservatives? The choice for conservatives is to go against Trump because he supports in vitro fertilization, or support Harris. I mean, that's not the option. Republicans and MAGA, the supporters of Trump, are not going to support Harris, even if Trump supports this. And also, I would say that at the end of the day, even if Trump gets in, he still has to push this legislation through. And I think that'll be very difficult, because if the Republicans are in control of one or both houses, he may not be able to even get that forward. So a controversial subject. He picked it up. It's a hot potato, as we say, and it's unclear what impact it will have.
Mark, but I'd also like to understand something that was interesting for me, to say the least. Kamala Harris indicates that she is going to have a Republican within the cabinet if she comes into power. Do you feel it's an interesting mix if that happens, and vice versa? Do you feel Trump should also include a Democrat in the cabinet if and when he comes into power?
I mean, Harris's point about putting a Republican. And what's a Republican? I mean, if you ask the Trump supporter, is he going to, who are they going to put in there? Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, or someone who's what we call Republican in name only, someone who's an anti-Trumper? That would definitely be amenable for Harris to do. So I don't think it says anything significant whatsoever about what Harris is saying. And she didn't say she would do it. I think she said she'd consider doing it. And as far as Trump is concerned, I mean, look, RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., just dropped out of the race, although his name is still on the ballot. And apparently he might get a cabinet position, and he's on the transition team. So, I think Trump has an open mind. And there are many Democrats who have become very unhappy with the Democratic Party. So he would probably include somebody like that. I don't think this is really a watershed development on either side. They pick all kinds of people. And
you have to admit it, Mark, it's an interesting development. You have to admit it. It's interesting from a reader's point of view, especially international readers. Coming to you, Ahsan, Representative Ro Khanna, who's a progressive Democrat from California, tells NBC's Meet the Press that Kamala Harris is a progressive who's pragmatic, focusing her campaign on improving the lives of working and middle-class families. Do you agree?
Well, I think the election promises so far are progressive. We have to agree that much. But be mindful that Harris has a baggage of Biden administration that she will carry, she is carrying with her. And how she navigates that baggage and come up as a fresh face, that's yet to be seen. I mean, she's clearly leading the polls, which indicates that she's connecting with the voters, especially with the young voters. What lies in front of her are huge economic reforms that Biden has been able to translate into policy, and that means taxing the rich, improving infrastructure, and creating more jobs. The unemployment in U.S. has been one of the highest currently. So, I mean, these are the reforms and the policy actions that are needed on her part. But so far, I mean, in terms of rhetoric, in terms of election campaigns, she is connecting with young people. There has been social media campaigns by young voters in her support. Youth groups are coming forward supporting Harris. Clearly, she's a young candidate. I mean, she's twice, 2 decades younger than Biden. She's almost 18 years younger than Trump. So she has that support of young people. So, I mean, how much she translates that into policy is yet to be seen.
All right. Thank you very much, Ahsan. Hamid, Durrani, Director Policy Research Center, to have joined us. Let's revert to Mark Meirowitz. Mark, interesting questions coming our way, and I'm sure you'll have a very interesting answer as well. Democrats have found their so-called leader in Kamala Harris, as is seen by the polls, and she has this definite edge over Biden. She's way younger and she's more aggressive in her approach. But her campaign chief, Jen Dillons, talks about her as an underdog. Mr. Biden never declared his campaign an underdog. How can it be that a campaign that by all metrics is better off than it was in late June is now pushing a narrative that things are worse than they were when Mr. Biden was in the race?
I know everybody wants to be an underdog, and because it's Americans like an underdog, but it's not correct, because look, where we are right now is basically the Democrats repaired the damage from Biden's debate. They've got a candidate in there now, but it's a dead heat. And the problem with Harris is she's been vice president for 3.5 years, and now she's the candidate, having been in effect selected by the Democratic Party. She doesn't give press conferences. She doesn't give valid interviews. She gave an interview on CNN, which was really an utter disappointment. It was a packaged item, edited item, 42 minutes, edited down to 18 minutes. And as far as her policies, what are her policies? And it is unclear to know what they are. The ones she's unleashed or talked about, fighting price gouging or funding new home construction and all sorts of other things. Economists have looked at that, including The Economist magazine and other top, and the Wall Street Journal and other top economists have looked at it, and they've said these are disastrous. I was just listening to Kevin O'Leary, who was on a program called The Shark Tank, and he's a top investor in real estate, and he said her programs are so calamitous and so disastrous that they would destroy the American economy. So in other words, she doesn't speak about her issues, she doesn't answer questions, and then she puts out these policies, which are not policies because she doesn't explain them, and she doesn't answer questions.
All right, let's talk about her policies, Mark. She has rolled out an economic agenda that includes new money for first-time homeowners, construction of 3 million new homes, and measures against price going on food. Yet the specifics are not what energized most attendees. It was a possibility of making history with Ms. Harris, and of course, as a lot of Democrats say, stopping Mr. Trump. Will this energy roll over to election day? The polls suggest that she has a slight edge over Mr. Trump. Will that edge retain itself in the month of November, or will the Republicans, move over and roar over to take the lead?
Well, I mean, as far as the Harris surge, that's unclear. And as far as the polls, look, polls have margin of error. So even if the numbers are close, one way or the other, it doesn't mean anything, because the margin of error means that it could go 3 points one way or 3 points the other way. So we really don't know. And we're very early, even though we seem close, the election, it changes as we get closer, especially because we have a debate on September 10th between Harris and Trump. And this is pivotal for Harris because she doesn't answer questions, doesn't discuss. She goes to rallies, and you're right, it's a surge. She goes to rallies. The Democratic convention, they have millions of balloons and everybody sings and they have a DJ. That's true. But the question is, what is she going to do when she is president? And why is it that after 3.5 years as vice president, we don't know what it is that she actually accomplished? She certainly didn't accomplish anything on the border. And as far as her economic policy, your point about the price gouging, I mean, it is very clear that, number one, we don't know what that means. Number two, what is gouging? What's the percentage of gouging? Is there price gouging? And the policies she proposes, and I'm sure you'll remember these, are very similar to what the Soviet Union in price controls. I think we had something like that under President Nixon in the 1970s, and it was an utter disaster to the American economy. She seizes on
to continue. We would have loved to continue. We're a bit short of time, but Mark Meirowitz, thank you very much to have joined us all the way from the US to discuss US politics. I'm sure you'll be part of many other programs in the future as well to discuss that. So thankful to have joined us tonight.